So long ago, it seems. We actually did the pilot back in 1976. In 1977, the cast of Will and Grace was in middle school, and I have a terrible cold, so I apologize if I sound a little nasal, but I am a Jew. Back then, in 77, I was a young father with one daughter, another one on the way. My stand-up career was really just starting to happen. I'd done a couple of pretty good Tonight shows with Johnny, and I thought if I could just keep going and playing the colleges and clubs that I was playing, and maybe add a few more good Tonight shows, who knows what can happen. And then the phone rang with my manager saying that I had just been offered a part. I didn't even have to read for it, on a new show on ABC, and they wanted me to be the first recurring gay character on network primetime television. And I said, I don't want to do a drama. And they said, no, it's a half-hour comedy called Soap. It's a farcical soap opera. Primetime, you'll be shooting your stuff in front of a live audience. So I said, let me read the scripts. So the pilot was 2 half hours. In the first half hour, I had one line. And I said, what am I doing this for? Second episode, I had a really unique scene. I'm home alone in my mom's room, and I'm wearing one of her dresses. And I'm just preening in front of the mirror, and I'm dancing and having a good time. She barges in, and she starts yelling at me, Jody, how many times have I told you to get out of my clothes? And then she stopped and went, oh, you wear it belted. And we had this long discussion about how to wear the frock, so now I was intrigued. So I went up to ABC to Fred Silverman's office, and I met there with the gifted producers, Tony Thomas, Danny Thomas's son, the late Paul Witt, who just left us this year. Really one of the true geniuses that I've ever worked with in television, the writer Susan Harris. Susan wrote the first 68 episodes of Soap all by herself. 15 main characters, no writer's room, just her, and at the time, a typewriter, some paper, and a 3-hole punch. And to complete the creative team, I thought the best director in television at the time, Jay Sandridge, who had just come off many years on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. So it was a really great package. So I wanted to know what the plans were for Jody. You know, what was he? Who was he? What was his character? What was the tone of the comedy? With all of these regulars, 15 regular characters every week, would I get enough to do? What would I do every week? And at the meeting, I discussed my own concerns, one of which was based on this. Do I take this small part of something potentially great, or do I wait and play a hunch and maybe sometime, maybe a couple of years even down the line, that maybe I might have my own situation? My big fear was, as great an actor as Carol O'Connor was, when Carol walked on the street, everybody yelled, Archie. If this worked for me, what would they yell at me on the street? Susan asked me simply, she said, well, Billy, let me ask you this. What would you ultimately like Jody to be? And I simply answered, a good man. I think it was the best 3-word answer I've ever given, and I very rarely give 3-word answers. So I said, okay. I agreed because, one, I love the challenge to create a character that was believable and real and likable, one that would get laughs while not getting laughed at, and it could be important. And I also knew that the religious right would come after me. So we shot the pilot, and we were given a great time slot on ABC's vaunted Tuesday night schedule. Look at this schedule. Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Three's Company, Soap, followed by the original This Is Us, Family. Now, weeks before we premiered, we were on the cover of Newsweek magazine, calling us this X-rated sitcom, and we were going to poison America because Soap did things that nobody else did besides my character. Think of what we did. Our lead character, Jessica Tate, played by the great Katherine Hellman. She had an affair with a much younger man who was played by Robert Urich. That was a big deal. Think about it. The Dick Van Dyke Show, Dick and Mary didn't even sleep in the same bed. They slept in separate beds, and if they were in the same room, his foot had to be on the ground. We also had Diana Canova, who played my cousin, and she seduced a priest in confession. And then there was this young gay director of commercials who was having an affair with an NFL quarterback. So we start production, and taping the show for me was a little bit of a struggle. Susan and I weren't in sync on what the character was yet. Audiences were nervous when we did my scenes in front of a live audience. I could just feel it. You could feel the tension, and that actually made me feel tense. But what was great, though, I had the support of this amazing, amazing cast, one of the great in television history to me. Richard Mulligan, Catherine Hellman, Catherine Damon, and Robert Guillaume as Benson. They were incredibly important to me, waiting for me when I would come off my set. They'd be there to give me a group hug or a pat on the back or a note about maybe doing something better. They were unbelievable people. Bob in particular. Bob was a very proud African-American man, proud of his role and protective of his role as an African-American butler to a very wealthy white family. And as I started to understand my character of Jody, I became more protective of Jody and what I represented. One day, Bob and I was sitting down, and he was very upset with some dialogue that he had. He wasn't happy with it. And I said, well, what was the problem? And he said, oh, you wouldn't understand. And I said to him, Bob, I do. Listen, we're both playing minorities. And at that point, we bonded and became the closest of friends throughout the run of Soap. Because we realized that we both had the responsibility to millions of people to get it right. Now, there were challenges and criticisms unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Some didn't like the character. I understood. It was a little bit over the top in the beginning, but yet others did. And we listened. Susan and I and Jay and Tony and Paul, we listened. And we kept trying like chemists to get the formula right. And I think by around episode 6, you saw a little bit of, I'm telling my brother that I'm gay. It started to get more comfortable for me to play him. When the show aired, we averaged over 20 million people a week. That's more than the top 5 shows added together now. And when that's your first weekly exposure to America, it changed my life. I started to get fan mail, some really lovely, terrific stuff, some of it negative, as you can imagine, but some from parents of gay teens who were struggling. And they thanked me for being a positive role model, and some from the very young people themselves. I have many of these letters which I have saved because they mean so much to me. And some from women who said one night with them would cure me. And I remember I got this one very creepy letter from Indiana from a young man, 17 years old in high school. He sent me this, it was creepy. It was a letter with words cut out of it like a newspaper. And I opened it and it said, God could change me back. Signed, Mike Pence, president of the Hoosier Hate Club. Is it me, or does he look like one of the people who chased the Von Trapp family into the Alps? Now, in public, this is 1977, there were bad jokes at my expense from people on the street, awkward stares from people in restaurants, calls from old girlfriends asking if it was their fault. Even my relatives didn't get it right, which, I mean, they were very old school, which meant that when they went to school, they pledged allegiance to the Tsar. That's old school. So seeing me play a gay man on television was a little bit hard for them to process. What, you like the athlete? You like the football guy? Well, listen, Mickey Mantle was a switch hitter, so I guess I get it. It was very difficult playing scenes with my boyfriend on the show. He was a very courageous, he had never acted before. His name was Bob Seger, and he was an Olympic gold medal winning pole vaulter who took that part. And we had to say, I love you, in front of live audiences. Back in 1977, a live studio audience saying this to each other, and they would giggle. The audience would giggle and laugh because they'd never seen this before. And there were many times I wanted to break character and just scream at the audience, what is your problem? But here's the truth. They may have had a problem because of the era and the time or the way that they were raised or just because of simple ignorance and fear. But they were watching They weren't turning the channel. They were watching. They were hearing two men sharing their feelings for each other. And I think in some small way, I'd like to think that Jody Dallas made just a little bit of difference. He opened some eyes, and I think we changed some minds. You saw the courtroom scenes. Jody had fathered a child, and he was in a fight for his daughter's custody. And it lasted about 4 weeks. ABC did a poll during the court battle, and by a 3-1 margin, they voted that Jody should have the child. And I thought that was our great victory back in 1980, that America trusted a child with a single gay parent. And at the end of SOAP's abbreviated run, it was only 4 years because religious groups had worn down our sponsors. Our last year, we went on without sponsors. ABC took care of the entire bill. I can proudly say that Jody became what I set out to make him on day one, a good man.